the Country had one primary demand when you started: change the constitution to reduce the powers of the executive. It seems things changed along the way. What happened?
I think actually it would not be fair to say that we have only one primary concern. I think it is, which is the constitution. I think if there's any one primary, thing we're looking for, which is fix the country. And I don't think that has changed. I think it's been consistent. It mainly evokes the sense and the overriding, conversation we're having about the country and the need to improve systems in the country. Now, as part of that conversation, one of the things we have said is that we need to have an honest conversation about the structure of political power and the powers of the executive in particular, but also in the ways in which governance, which derives from the Constitution, is structured. And that's one of the reasons why the Constitution has been and continues to be one of the big things that we're still calling for a significant, constitutional overhaul that addresses the concerns of a new generation. But it's not the only thing. I mean, there's so many other things that tie into the Constitution conversation. And the reason why the Constitution continues to gain a prominence in our advocacy is that our advocacy is focused on systems that deliver the kind of governance and kind of, politics we have. And a key part of the system we have is the Constitution. So this is not a surprising thing that it enjoys the pride of place that we give to it.
So you don't think that your focus has changed? We will go into all the details of the things that have happened over the last few months, but
let me tell you why it hasn't changed. We continue to mobilize and advocate around a new constitution for a new generation. We still collecting signatures for that. In fact, we've received funding from the Open Society, which is to help, develop a series of town hall meetings and training and grassroots mobilization, which is linked to the conversation around a new constitution.
Oh.
So it's still a prominent part of our advocacy, right?
You talk about funding. We're actually going to go into that, but since you talked about it, Open Society, from where exactly? Who is funding you?
So one of the things that we started mobilizing from the very beginning was that we need to challenge ways in which civil society is funded in Ghana, right? Like, a lot of our politics is focused on, funding political parties, and, there's a lot of research about campaign financing which shows that significant amount of money coming into our politics, which is funding political parties, is money which is tied to criminality, it's money that is tied to corruption, and it displaces the amount of scrutiny we can bring to bear on these political parties and their activities.
Sorry to interrupt you,
In fact,
Mr. Vormawor, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I would let you give your explanation. I just want you to answer the specific question of the Open Society funding. I asked the specific question of who is funding you.
Embedded in the question itself is the answer, right? Like, there's an Open Society grant.
From who? Which institution?
Open Society Foundation.
Open Society Foundation. Where is this foundation from?
So, to give a bit of context about how the Open Society operates, Open Society has several, branches across the world, and which have very different regional focuses. There's one for the Open Society Foundation which focuses exclusively on African-related issues, and it's from the Open Society Foundation.
We'll go back to the funding again, but there was you say that your focus has not changed. That doesn't seem to be the narrative of those who left Fix the Country, for instance, because we are aware there was a partnership with the Economic Fighters League, a similar activist group. However, this group decided to sever ties over partisan links. Some members claimed the Fix the Country's movements, for instance, focus had become political, and so they had to move on. Which political party are you linked to?
Well, I think that's a very, very naive view. Fix the Country has always been political. There's nothing, in fact, that concerns the way in which we govern our country, the ways in which we discuss the structure of resources, who controls what resources, persons who are not accountable for their power and their politics, which is not a political activity and a political endeavor. Now, if you follow the conversations around the reasons why Face the Country and Economic Fighters League decided to split, it was linked to what does liberation mean and what is the way forward to getting there. The Economic Fighters League believes that it must contest political party election. And so it is contemplating and is actively recruiting candidates to field them for the 2024 election. Face the Country does not believe at this stage in that kind of mobilizing. We think there's a lot of work.
I want to get clarity. I want to get clarity. Did you say that Face the Country has always been political or has not been political?
Has always been political. It has never been partisan and has no interest in being partisan. Now, if the EFL decides to mobilize as a political party, then obviously we can say that, well, that is not the focus of Face the Country. And so, in fact, what you're seeing is that a group which wants to redefine for itself its image and where it wants to go, it's moving away from the Face the Country umbrella precisely because Face the Country wants to maintain a non-partisan outlook in the ways in which it holds political power and government to account, you know.
Oh, please land.
Yeah, so yeah, the Economic Fighters League are persecuting an electoral agenda, which we've given them our support. In fact, I have said that if the Economic Fighters League goes on to contest elections, I would vote for them. But precisely as it stands now, I have no interest in elective politics. Several of the other conveners who have stayed and mobilizing with us do not think that in competing for elections is the way in which we discipline our politics. In fact, we add to the noise, and so that's not the ways in which we want to mobilize. But yeah, in terms of our focus, I think that the substantive conversations that we've been having, when you look at it from the very beginning, right? There were over 12 million tweets and also posts on social media, on Facebook and on Twitter, which were like a range of issues, both at the national level, local level, developmental issues concerning the nature of power and the way in which we scrutinize power. All these conversations are all a bigger part of the conversation and have never disappeared. Right? You don't take the 12 million tweets on Facebook and say everybody was tweeting a new constitution for a new generation. No. There were people who were talking about their rent issues, there were people who were talking about flooding issues, as we're seeing currently happening in the system. So many people were talking about, police violence, police brutality. People were talking about the ways in which the state was being repressive against activists. And so when you look at it, because I know that in your introduction you talked about some of our fellow activists like Kali J, maybe even AKUFO-ADDO, who precisely because of the threats they were receiving decided that they couldn't continue any longer. And that tells you the kind of issues we're dealing with as the young people trying to mobilize and trying to discipline our democracy better. AKUFO-ADDO, for instance, was criticized of was threatened with acid if she ever stepped up onto the streets, right? Kali J had people attacking the businesses and calling up people who gave him contract as an influencer and telling them to cancel the contract. These are things that we need to have conversations about for people to understand the real cost of mobilizing, just as young people who want better for your country. So we need to have these conversations honestly.